Did the Big Ten portal king, Curt Cignetti, do it again? We're going to talk about it right after the stinger. If you like what we are doing here at Campus to Canton, please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. We are trying to get to 4,000 subscribers by the end of January, and the only way to do that is with your help. We are wanting to continue to spread the good word of the college fantasy football game, and we need your help to do it. We will also be dropping videos every single day throughout the month of January. So please make sure to turn that bell icon on so you don't miss a single one of them. All right, Curt Cignetti. Last year brought in over 30 players in the transfer portal and has now done it again by landing what many consider to be one of the top quarterbacks in the portal in QB Fernando Mendoza. Mendoza is a very good quarterback. I would argue a quarterback that in the right system can thrive. He's not a guy that's going to bring you a ton of rushing upside, but overall is a very good player. Over 334 rushing yards last year, if you do not take into account sacks, which I know that the NCAA does, but I do think that he can bring you a little over 100 rushing yards from a fantasy perspective. And with Indiana using his legs a little bit, we saw close to that with Curtis Rourke this year. He threw for 3,004 yards at Cal this year, while missing 2 games due to an injury, and threw a 16-6 touchdown to interception ratio. He had 16 turnover-worthy plays compared to the 11 big-time throws, but his adjusted completion percentage was 75.5. Overall, I think Fernando Mendoza is a very good quarterback. He can give you something with his legs, but I don't think he's going to be great there. I think more of like when I say a system quarterback, a quarterback that will thrive in a system if put up or given to him in a way that he can thrive, getting the ball out quickly to wide receivers. Now it looks like EJ Williams and Elijah Surratt will both be back. So that is a big thing for Indiana. He's going to have 2 big targets on the outside. Even more interesting, the Hoosiers just hired Atlanta Falcons passing specialist Chandler Whitmore as their new quarterbacks coach and co-offensive coordinator. And it sounds like, as Mendoza was on campus this past weekend, that he fell in love with this offensive system that they're going to be running. And Curt Cignetti gets the most out of these players. Let's be honest. His time at JMU was incredible. Obviously, he was one of the main reasons JMU was able to come up from the FCS to the FBS. And they went, I believe, undefeated in their first season, should have been in a bowl game. They had an incredible season. He did all that with quarterback Jordan McLeod, who ended up transferring out. But Jordan McLeod was a fantasy superstar. And his last year at JMU, he put up 447.6 points. He finished the year's QB3 and averaged 34.4 fantasy points per game. Now, again, that came with a lot of rushing, which Fernando Mendoza is not going to bring you. So it's probably closer to that Curtis Rourke scenario, right? Okay, well, Curtis Rourke finishes QB32 this year. That's a starting quarterback for most fantasy leagues on the college fantasy side. 324.6 fantasy points overall, averaging 27 fantasy points per game. But I do think Fernando Mendoza is just a better quarterback overall than Curtis Rourke and will bring a little bit more upside to this passing attack. They did also land Roman Hemby just the other day in the portal at running back, so that should be right there with whoever they have transferring out, and they are losing. The running game should be just fine with Roman Hemby. So landing Fernando Mendoza, I think, is going to keep this offense on track. Like, I think Curt Cignetti is going to keep the momentum moving forward. I know that it wasn't a great playoff game versus Notre Dame, and Curt Cignetti is typically a play caller that challenges the ball down the field. And we saw it in the fourth quarter and against a good Notre Dame team. And I know some people will argue, they were already kind of out of it or whatever, so Notre Dame wasn't trying that hard. Doesn't matter. They still drove down the field and scored and looked good on those final couple drives. And I wish they would have done that early on, because I think it would have been a more competitive game for the Hoosiers. And I think Fernando Mendoza can do that. He's a guy who will not be afraid to throw the ball into some tight windows, specifically in the short intermediate parts of the field. We do only have him with a ball velo of 54, which is about average. So he doesn't have the strongest arm in the country, but it's not poor. It's around average of a college quarterback. He comes fairly well to Colin Klein, who used to be at Kansas State. I do think he loses a little bit the further down the field he goes, but overall, I think he's a very good quarterback. He has a great completion percentage. I mean, he was just under 70%. I believe he was at 68% last year, so just under 70%. That's extremely good for a college quarterback, and I think he's going to be able to, again, take this offense up a level than what Curtis Rourke had it this year. Typically, he passes the ball in earlier neutral game script situations anywhere between the 45 to 55% mark. So we should see passing early. The only year they didn't do that was in 2022 with James Madison. But even this past year, they were almost at 50% with as good as the running game was. So I expect them to continue passing the ball. And their offensive pass success rate has been above 50%. So he should thrive with, again, a quarterback who's just better. He's got a better quarterback. The weapons are going to be there. I think that Indiana is going to be able to do it again. And their schedule is actually kind of interesting next year. They do not have a ton of tough games on there. I realistically think we could be looking at Indiana in back-to-back playoffs. Old Dominion, Kennesaw State, Indiana State, Illinois, Iowa. Like Illinois, Iowa are not going to be easy games, but I do think with a quarterback like Fernando Mendoza, they can win those. Oregon's probably going to be a loss. But then Michigan State, UCLA, Maryland, Penn State, Wisconsin, Purdue. Maybe Penn State. So again, if they only have 2 losses, they're going to be in the playoff conversation. I think Fernando Mendoza going here could help raise his draft stock some and being in the Big Ten and playing a bunch of better defenses. But overall, I think it's a very good landing spot. Again, Curtis Rourke finishes QB 32 last year. I think for Fernando Mendoza, with arguably all the same talent around him and just being a better quarterback and having a NFL offensive coordinator coming in or offensive specialist coming in to help run this offense, I mean, we could be looking at a guy who finishes in the top 24 as a fantasy quarterback. What do you guys think, though, of Fernando Mendoza coming over? Oh, should mention, interesting quarterback room. We thought Tyler Cherry was going to get this job. Obviously, it's likely going to be Fernando Mendoza, and his brother is also in this room, Alberto Mendoza. What do you guys think about Fernando Mendoza landing with the Hoosiers? Can Curt Cignetti keep the playoff run going again next year? Let me know in the comments. We'll talk to you guys again soon.